Honourable Member St James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to join and contribute to this debate, which, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said, is not, he didn't use these words, one of these sexy debates, but which is really an important, very important and significant debate to our socio and economic and cultural development. When I was a young boy, 50 years ago, I believe at that time Barbados was the second most densely populated country in the world per square mile. It is no longer that. It is, I think, way down, probably about the 19th most or around there. And that's as a result of what we've heard repeatedly throughout this debate, that our growth rate within the last 50 years has been very low. In fact, it's the lowest population growth rate in CARICOM. And our population has grown only by 16.5% in the last 60 years. We've heard as well, of course, that our fertility rates have remained below replacement rate since 1980. I believe is now estimated to be 1.9 per person, as when the replacement rate to keep the population at the same level even is 2.1 per child. And what is even more concerning, of course, is that over the next 30 years, our dependency ratio, or ratio of young people of working age who will be looking after senior citizens, is expected to grow to nearly 2 dependents per person of working age. This is an issue, Mr. Speaker, that not only besets Barbados as a problem, but the whole world, to at least most of the world, I should say, not the whole world. And it is especially so in the developed world, the so-called richer countries, the OECD countries of the world. And in fact, The Economist magazine, in its edition of May 25th this year, less than 2 months ago, in an article entitled, "Can Rich Countries Spend Their Way Out of a Baby Shortage?" spoke on this issue for 3 pages and spoke towards the kind of policies and incentives that some of the wealthy countries in the world are utilizing to try and increase their population by getting young people to have more children. So in fact, France, since this century, has dispersed 3.5 to 4% of its GDP a year on a mixture of handouts to young people, to couples, tax break services, to try to increase its population. The Nordic countries, as we know, combine a lengthy maternity period, up to 1 year, I believe, even more in Sweden or Finland, with getting generous child care. And of course, some European countries combine that with a paternity leave as well. China, of course, there are provinces in China which are offering newly married couples a lump sum, but only if the bride is below age 25. In other words, the younger, their philosophy is the younger the bride is, the more children the couple will have. And in Russia, women who have a child before they turn 25 will be exempt from income tax payment. And Hungary offers a similar benefit to mothers who have their first child before age 30. So these are all areas of policy decisive making that countries in Europe are seeking to increase their population by baby boom. In the United States, there's a non-profit organization which pays women $7,500 from the time of pregnancy to the first birthday of the child. So it is not only Barbados that this issue is, on the minds of legislators and policymakers. I commend the scripters and those who were party to the creation of this policy. I would have met with them when I was Minister of Home Affairs for a whole day session. And I know the Honorable Member for St. Michael South Central was in attendance as well. They have, and it's significant, and the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned that, they have not put a figure on what they perceive or imagine to be a reasonable population size of Barbados. Right now, the census is saying is about 269,000, having declined. But clearly, there are now many countries in the world that are just above the size of Barbados, which has much larger populations. Issues, the study though does propose issues such as widening our citizenship criteria, or rather citizenship possibilities, by bringing it down. Right now, as we all know, an individual is only entitled to Barbados citizenship by descent if either of their parents are Barbadian, but bringing it down to grandchildren and possibly great-grandchildren, as we heard the Honorable Prime Minister say. And this has been mooted and thought of since I was Minister of Home Affairs, and that is now 4 years plus ago. Even now, sir, it is so serious that even now, I still get emails and WhatsApps as to whether, from people, Barbadians living overseas, as to whether their grandchildren are entitled to Barbados citizenship yet. So it's something that we need to move on. I know that the Honorable Member for Christchurch East has promised, especially recently, a new immigration bill which will address these issues. And I believe he understands the urgency of dealing with this situation. When I travel to our missions in England and New York, for example, as I'm sure other members of Parliament and ministers do, the issue is raised by the missions and as to the number of Barbadians residing in those jurisdictions to which they cater for, obviously, who ask and inquire about this issue, whether directly to the missions or at town hall meetings when Barbadians in authority visit. So it's something that I think is definitely required by our diaspora, and as a means to widen our Barbadian population and certainly citizenship. And we all know that regathering is on again next year, having been unavoidably aborted in 2020 when COVID came upon us. And I believe that will be an opportune time for us to have new immigration legislation in place and policy, so that we can offer the children, the descendants of Barbadian citizens beyond their children citizenship of Barbados. The We have to, of course, encourage repatriation of Barbadians and stem our brain drain. And I know that that's not such an easy task, Mr. Speaker, because the whole profile of individuals is to travel and seek what they consider better opportunities outside of their country. And but obviously, if we make Barbados more attractive to young persons especially, we will get more Barbadians coming back home rather than wanting to stay in the northern hemisphere. The fact of the matter, sir, though, is that we have many people who are not born in Barbados residing in Barbados too, because the United Nations estimates that 12% of our resident population here in Barbados are immigrants, are people who came to Barbados, mainly from other Caribbean countries, more women than men, 55% being female, and 75% being of working age, generally between ages 15 and 64 years old. So even though, as other members, in particular the Honorable Prime Minister said, even though we have been immigrating to other countries since emancipation, whether it's Panama, whether it is obviously the northern countries, England in the 50s and 60s, many of our people there were nurses, worked on the London transport, whether it was Canada in the 1960s, 70s, when Canada started to open up its immigration laws and policies to allow professionals to come there, especially from the Caribbean, and many of our nurses went there, for instance, even coming across then from England to Canada, and whether Panama, as we all know, yes, 1/3 of our people, particularly men, left and went to Panama and helped build the Panama Canal, including my grandfather. So even we have been a people who seek better opportunities outside. And therefore, quite honestly, it was extremely disappointing to me, and I say it again, as I've said in this parliament before, for me to be in parliament as an opposition MP and see the policies of the previous Democratic Labour Party government during the last decade, in which they intentionally had a policy of sending out people who were contributing to this society, to our economy, and sending them back, especially to other CARICOM countries such as Guyana and Jamaica. Ever so welcome wait for a call by the late Prime Minister, then Prime Minister, and of course followed on by his successor Prime Minister too. And all of us are one in this CARICOM, as far as I'm concerned. Slave ship just let some of us off here in Barbados, some of us off in St. Vincent, and some off in Trinidad, but we all came from the same place. And therefore it was especially disappointing, and that was the crux of a matter. Whether there were 30,000 Guyanese here or not, as the opposition said, those Guyanese were contributing to this society. They were paying income tax, and a lot of them. They were spending money. In fact, many business people around Barbados said that their businesses went under as a result of the policy of the last Democratic Labour Party government to send home Guyanese and Jamaicans, because they were the people supporting their businesses. Businesses in Fairchild Street, for example, especially on a weekend. So, look, we know that there is a sector of xenophobia. That is the word that was used by former Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Dame Billy Miller to describe Barbadians or some Barbadians when it comes to allowing or the idea of people coming into Barbados, especially from other CARICOM countries. But it has to be understood that an increased population in Barbados, an increased productive population that is working, of working age and skilled, will increase the economy of this country, will increase the GDP of this country, and will make life better for everyone, including Barbadians who live here all their life and who are born here. And that we have to have an open view of this issue. It cannot be a myopic view if we want to move to the next level. It is estimated that the number of immigrants from Barbados, people leaving right now, still exceeds the number of immigrants entering Barbados on an annual basis by, on average, about 400 persons a year. So it is not a troubling situation, and we have to reach a situation where we treat to the issue of more skilled persons coming in this country, more people trained, for example, in some of the areas that we have identified as areas that we have to improve our economy and get new industry, such as graphic designing and animation and specialty rums and pharmaceuticals and biotech industries and energy and renewable ICT. And those are areas that we need skills in this country, and we have to be open about it. Another way, of course, and people, of course, that have the resources and capacity to invest in our country and in our future, and also has to be encouraged as well. Therefore, I look forward in anticipation for a debate on the immigration legislation. I know that the Honorable Prime Minister has said that that legislation, as is the recent bent of Cabinet and Parliament, will go before one of the select committees of Parliament which were formed last year for wider public consultation. We had some consultations, I believe, earlier. I know the Population Commission had consultations as well, because I attended a meeting last year, a town hall meeting, that was held at Alexandra School. The issue, though, Mr. Speaker, is that it was disappointing that many more Barbadians did not attend and participate in these town hall meetings. And this is a problem, that this government has been extremely transparent and accountable, much more so than any previous government, giving our people the opportunity to input, but our people largely don't take up the opportunity. And then when you pass the legislation, when you pass the policy, and something happens that affects them, you then get a big lot of noise and long talk. And I urge Barbadians to come out more in this participatory democracy that this government has created and is seeking to further, and have a say in these issues that would affect us. The issue has come up as to a fear among Barbadians that more people in this country will put harder work on our infrastructure, on our public utility network and transportation, and our water supply, and our health and educational services. Even though that is clearly a challenge, as I said, sir, when more productive people are in Barbados, our economy will grow. One of the challenges will be to ensure that these people, working age and who are working, pay the income tax and pay the NIS. And that is very important because there are too many people that feel that they are doing well by cheating government and not paying income tax. I came across a person the other day, sir, who gladly told me makes about $10,000 a month in one of the trades. I wouldn't say which trade because I don't want any identification of the person. But he doesn't pay any income tax, doesn't pay any NIS. In other words, he making more than my parliamentary salary, but not paying any income tax or NIS. No, the government authorities have to tackle this issue. And it will be interesting to know from the NIS department, by whatever name called Social Security Services, to know since the adjustment and change and making it easier for people to pay NIS and to pay by installments as the work, let's say these 2 months to pay in then, but the month they don't pay, don't have to pay in. It'd be interesting to know that with those adjustments which came into effect on the 1st of January this year, whether the percentage increase in self-employed persons paying NIS has moved significantly from what I believe we were told was just 15% last year when the amendments were debated, led by the Honourable Member for St. Peter, and I think it was September last year. Because a dent has to be made and people need to understand that they need to pay the income tax and the NIS, because you can't want all the social services, free education, free healthcare, or you want all the roads repaired, street lights, any house that licked down the roof off during burial or else repaired by government, even if you have the money to repair it, fishing boats now to get repaired, but you don't contribute to the gross to the income tax and to the NIS. So this is a challenge that will have to be looked at once we're bringing in more people. But I have no fear about the overextension of our educational and healthcare system and our infrastructure and public utilities, because I believe that as we grow, all of those would be looked after with more money in our economy. The number of Bajans, and this is an interesting statistic as well, Mr. Speaker, that the study brings out, that the number of Bajans living overseas total almost 30% of our population. So in other words, if our population is about 270,000, about 90,000 born and bred Bajans live overseas. And that's an interesting statistic. And like I said, when you add up their children and the grandchildren, you can start seeing that. And once we make Barbados more attractive, we will get some of them back. That's the truth, especially, I suppose, as they seek to retire. But we also want some young, productive Bajans and persons of Bajans descent to come here as well. Even if it is, because we have a more attractive environment and more attractive climate. The issue of government, therefore, as well, has to look at issues such as paternity leave. And I know that it is something that the administration is looking at, I believe it was in the Barbados Labour Party's 2018 manifesto. I can't recall if it was in the 2022 one as well. But I know that can have a bit of complications because there are some men that might want to claim maternity leave for two sets of children from two different women. But it's something that certainly the administration needs to reflect on. Issues of flexible working arrangements is also something that has to be looked on, because let's face fact that with the main burden for raising children being on women, we have to come to a situation, and for many reasons, where we have a better facilitation of flexi work. We had it during COVID, sir, and we can do it again, even working from home, some people. So these are issues that would need to be addressed as well. I agree and support the argument by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central when she introduced the resolution that just calling on Barbadians to have more children, as was done on the floor of this Parliament by the Democratic Labour Party's last Minister of Education, is oversimplifying the issue, because a child conceived tonight not going to be really productive till 20 years at the minimum from now. So when the then member for Christchurch East Central stood up right there, sir, and made that statement, I was quite honestly astonished. But a simplified brain will give a simplified solution to an issue. Has to be more than that. The issue is that there are a lot of women who may be, I don't even want to say below the poverty line, but living in economic circumstances that are not the best, who will ask the question, but how now you're asking me to get more children, so who can help me pay for them? And then we all know that a lot of women who may be in better economic circumstances and in professions and advancing their careers don't get more than 2 children. 1, if any, and a lot none. That is their right, of course. So again, quite honestly, when a member of the last Democratic Labour Party Parliament made a statement about women who didn't have children, again, I was astonished. And in this Parliament, when she was sitting in the chair you're now sitting, Mr. Speaker, in her capacity as Deputy Chair, I chided her, because that is a foolish statement too, right? So it is not an easy issue to circumvent. Yes, we have to, it would be good to have more fertility policy issues and speaking about well-beings in total of family. The fact of the matter, as the Honourable Prime Minister referred, our policy starting in the 1980s for family planning probably worked a bit too well. That's the reality of the situation. And of course, in the early 1980s, we brought in on the floor of this Parliament termination of pregnancy legislation, something which I wholeheartedly support, because a woman has to have the right to determine her sexual and reproductive health and to determine what she wants to do with her body. So I totally am at conflict with the United States Supreme Court on that issue, reversing the effect of Roe versus Wade after 50 years of precedent. but that is the United States, sir, and their other CARICOM countries that still decriminalize abortion, but I will have none of that, sir. A woman has to have the right over her own body and has to have the right over her own body. So we accept that there are issues which are challenging in terms of population increase, but those that are that you can reach out and touch, like changing our immigration policy, like wooing more people into Barbados by the policies that this government is implementing and seeking to invent, and to make Barbados a more investment-friendly place must come in. I commend and support this population study, Mr. Speaker, and thank those who served on the commission for their public service to our country. I'm obliged to you, sir.